When I was around 1 year old, my grandfather picked me up and placed me on his knee, or at least that is what I remember. I remember how he looked, the chair he was sitting in, how the room was decorated. He died shortly after that. I have no memories of him other than that moment. Realistically, I'm not sure that moment ever happened, as it's claimed to be nearly impossible to have such vivid memories before the ages of 2.5 to 3 years old. But it was very real. I've told people about this memory, and in some ways they have confirmed it happened, that perhaps it wasn't some reconstructed memory of him based on information I picked up, despite never really knowing him. Memories, like old video game graphics, are at best unreliable. I've always had a fascination with early three-dimensional art. It's one of the reasons I decided to study game art in the first place. Early polygonal games ask players to imagine a person, the way one would recall a story, whereas the modern gaming landscape does everything in its power to prove a person exists. During the PS2 era, for example, a character was roughly made of 5,000 polygons, a simple texture map, and was rigged and modeled using knowledge of how bodies operated. Modern characters consist of hundreds of thousands of polygons using multiple 4K texture maps, realistic animations, and hair simulations. There was a time when developers used FMVs as a tool to bridge the gap, to help the player better imagine these characters, these places, and the results were some of the most interesting and beautiful pieces of art gaming has ever created. 20 years plus, and looking back, they are still burned in my mind. Because of these FMVs, my memory has filled in the gaps. Whether or not they looked realistic doesn't matter, because in my memory, they were some of the most real stories, real characters I could ever imagine.
James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else? In position. It's showtime, girls.
When I was young, I hated FMV cutscenes. Why can't my games look like this? I thought. Now, an old man decaying rapidly, living in a world where my games do look like that. Well, better than that. I find myself with an empty hole in my chest, a longing that games, in particular the storytelling of games, don't feel like they used to. FMV, or full motion video, produced a surreal disconnect between gameplay and cutscene in early three-dimensional games. This contrast gave the sequences an almost dreamlike quality. Characters who had looked angular and puppet-like in-game suddenly appeared smooth and hyper-real, yet their movements were often slightly stiff, and their lighting just off a touch, enough to drift into the uncanny valley. The result was eerie, familiar characters that are now burned into my brain like an old friend or relative I haven't seen in years. And while today's in-game graphics go beyond anything these FMV cutscenes were doing back in the early 2000s, I still find myself pining for them with something more than simple nostalgia glasses, more of a grief for a lost art form.
I guess we're all set.
All right then, we're out of here.
Oh no!
It's here. It's time to go.
There's something strangely human about characters in old FMV cutscenes. Despite their stiff movements, blurred textures, and vacant stares, they often feel more real than the photorealistic faces we see in modern games. It's not because they look more lifelike, but because they existed in a space between reality and imagination, a digital approximation of humanity that left room for us to project emotion onto them. No game or series showcases this idea better than Silent Hill. Silent Hill is a world where we do not play as a superhero or a larger-than-life character, but by the nature of the game's story, we are average, we are real. So when presenting a realistic character with the limitations of the time, we are left with a very interesting result. I once heard that rather than motion capture, because in the early 2000s motion capture was somewhat of a new concept, they decided to animate the faces and emotional changes by hand.
If you open the mouth, muscles around here is tighten, but motion capture cannot capture it. But if I make them in front of mirror, I can notice it. I can capture it. That's most of most biggest reason.
Their imperfections, awkward lip syncs, glassy eyes, and jittery gestures created a haunting sense of presence. They looked like people trying to be people, caught somewhere between code and consciousness. Modern characters rendered with flawless skin and motion-captured precision leave little to the imagination. The mystery is gone, the illusion is complete, and yet paradoxically, we feel less connected. Old FMV characters linger in memory because they evoke a kind of digital nostalgia, a feeling of recognition that's both warm and unsettling. They remind us not of real humans, but of the idea of humanity. Like most people, I have had to deal with the loss of loved ones, of family members, whether aunts, uncles, or grandparents. And like most people, I have the imprint of those loved ones forever etched in my brain, a version of them that may or may not have actually existed. They were real people, but I'm not sure if how I'm remembering them is authentic or real. This is how Silent Hill presented its characters, its world. A fragile simulation flickering on a screen. In that space of imperfection, they became eerily familiar, like ghosts of emotion we once believed were real. In an era of limited polygon counts and pixelated textures, cutscenes of the early Final Fantasy games were portals into another reality. They were a tool for developers to use to help create a sense of space, a living, breathing world with living, breathing characters, so that even when we jumped back into our low-poly gameplay, our imaginations were running wild. No franchise understood this better than Square Enix and the Final Fantasy series. As a child, they absolutely blew my mind, suddenly giving shape and weight to places and characters my imagination had already begun to build. When the camera swept across Midgar in Final Fantasy VII, or showed Eunice summoning in Final Fantasy X, it felt like stepping into a living myth. These FMVs transformed simple environments into sweeping cities, vast skies, and mythic landscapes, letting players glimpse the full scale of the worlds they were exploring. In just a few seconds, a cutscene could suggest history, emotion, and grandeur, turning low poly settings into places that felt alive and deeply imagined, the way a great author could use words to describe a place. These moments did more than just impress technically. They defined the emotional tone of the games. FMV gave faces to heroes we'd only seen in miniature, and made their triumphs and tragedies feel monumental. The contrast between gameplay and cinematic cutscene created anticipation. Players knew that when the visuals shifted, something unforgettable was about to happen. It's often said that anticipation is better than the actual thing. The anticipation of sex can be sometimes better than the act itself, or the anticipation of going on vacation can be, in some cases, more fulfilling than the vacation. Early video games understood this, and it's one of the reasons these scenes felt so incredible. What you could control ended, and what the machine had already decided began. That boundary between agency and fate, player and program, gave these videos an epic, unsettling gravity. Today, as games pursue seamless realism, those old FMVs stand out precisely because they don't look real. Their blend of artistry, imperfection, and ambition captures a strange in-between state. Too detailed to be abstract, too artificial to be lifelike. They are digital ghosts of a medium discovering its own language. They are a reflection of an era when game visuals existed on the threshold between worlds. And like all things caught between, they continue to haunt us.
I'm here for you, James. See? I'm real.